great to see everyone here this afternoon. Can you actually believe it's been 25 years? Yes. Some people are saying yes. Well, we have a short program this afternoon. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Woody has worked real hard on putting some things together. We have the help of a lot of people, some of you. What I want to do to start with is have everyone introduce themselves. We're going to do this very quickly because you're only going to say three things. You're going to say your name, what you were doing in 1975, or what you taught in 1974, 75, 75, 76, and what you're doing today. So I'm just going to pass this around. We'll just go around the circle. I'm Jerry Bexton. I was an 8th grade core teacher here when the tornado hit, and I'm now the principal of Lewis & Clark. I'm very happy to be in that position.
Penny, let's see, when I was here, I was Martin, Cyril, or Ellis, now I'm Cyril, and I'm retired. I'm a Spanish teacher.
Sally Jelson, and I was a 7th grade science teacher, and I'm retired.
Dee Dee Augusto, I taught English, and I still teach English down at Central. Ellen Johnson, and I taught PE, and I'm not doing anything. Yay! Carol Hibb, and I taught 7th and 8th grade basic core here, and I'm Department Chair of Social Studies and teach AP American History at Senegal now.
I'm Jim Ream. I taught 7th, 8th, and 9th, I think. In a while, science, and I retired 5 years ago.
Judy Kirchhoff, I was German and 8th grade core. I'm back at Lewis & Clark part-time working on rebuilding the German department again, and I'll never get to retire.
I'm Wesley Dacus, PE teacher back in what year that was. But at the present time, I'm at Dean of Students at King Science Center at Man for Mr. Jones.
I'm Ruth Owen Tyler, and I taught core and reading, and that's about it. That was enough. And my room is the one that Jerry Bexton's overalls flew out. I'm Luann Stoffers, and I'm looking at the interiors and Tony Walters. And now I'm looking at interior.
Jessie Benson. I worked in the cafeteria, and now I'm assistant manager at Northwest House.
I'm Christine Harms. I worked in the cafeteria in the salad department for 23 years. I'm retired and love it.
Ellie Brosnahan. I was in religious education, and I was a nun at the time of school dueling. And then I taught here the next year and tried to find my books. And I'm semi-retired right now. I'm working for the YWCA.
Joy Carlson, 8th grade core. Currently, I'm queen of the world.
What? He says they let you think that. So I let him think. That's me fair.
I'm Joanne Freeman. When I taught here, I was known as a librarian, not a media specialist. I'm now retired, and it's fun.
And she lost her house. Arda lost her house. But she had a drink in her hand on the way down. And a library card.
Elaine Elizabeth Russell, I was a grade core teacher out in Portable before I did. I'm retired now, playing around.
I'm Beverly Garrison, and I was a 7th grade core teacher forever, and I'm retired. I'm Georgie Morrison, and I came with the building. I'd like to see how many others were here that during the first year. There's two. Yeah. I've been retired for 16 years, wonderful years, and I taught mainly 8th grade math, some 7th grade.
I'm glad you learned geography, and I do anything I can.
Dan Jones, formerly an assistant principal, and I built all your schedules. Kept you busy.
All right, Thomas, Opal Newby. Somebody said these are my declining years, and I could jolly well decline and do anything I don't do.
Amen to the last statement. I'm doing really good at that. I'm Trudy Stratton, and I taught home economics, and I've been retired 10 years, and I've just been gabbing here and there and doing this and that.
Ursula Huey, I had 8th grade core, and I'm retired, of course, in this month.
Nancy Bisak, I taught home ec, and I'm retired.
She's gone. I thought you all knew me. I'm the one with the striped socks. Kathy Smith Squires, and I was teaching 8th grade core, and I'm back teaching at Northwest High School now. English. And I still know her. Everybody still knows Patty.
Right. Pat Bogart Burford, and I was a guidance counselor, and I've been retired for 5 years.
I'm Tabby Hanrahan, and I was a 9th grade general math teacher back then, and now I'm a career counselor at Central High School.
I'm Jan Heimbach, and I was at home in my basement with my 2 little preschoolers at the time. I had no idea what was going on over here on 72nd Street. I'm currently a counselor here at Lewis and Clark.
Ron Caesar, taught 7th grade life science and 9th grade honors biology here. I'm presently teaching biology at South High School.
Jack Mason III, I was a 7th grade student when the tornado hit. I remember it well.
This is Barry White, isn't it?
Currently, I'm an assistant custodian at King Science Center with Mr. Davis, Dean of Students.
I'm Rosalie Kenny, and I was a PE teacher here with Ellen Johnson and Wesley. Who are we missing? John and John Georgeson. And Georgeson, okay. And now I'm currently English as a second language teacher at Norris Middle School.
I'm Gordon Strubley, taught math 7th and 8th and 9th grade, and right now I'm retired.
I'm Art Nepple. I taught 7th and 8th grade math, 9th grade business class, and nice study hall in here, and I'd like to thank the girls for all the coffee and cookies they served me over the years from the cafeteria. I'm currently self-employed home remodeling and business remodeling, commercial.
Woody Dillman, I was teaching 7th grade core, and I'm retired.
I'm Linda Wells. I taught 8th grade core and 9th grade world geography, and I get to retire in 2 years.
Linda's currently in charge of the gifted education program for the school district. According to Dan's clock, the tornado hit the school at around 4:45. I think Dan said his clock stopped at 4:46. And that was on May 6th, 1975, and that was a Tuesday afternoon. And there were some people in the building, and I'm sure we'll hear about that as people do their recollection. The following day, as I remember it, only designated personnel reported to the school because they needed to check to make sure it was structurally sound before they brought anybody back in. But on the following day, and for the remainder of that week, we were here packing things up, getting them ready to move either to the warehouse or to Norris Middle School. The administrators were working on getting things prepared for us at Norris, and on the following Monday, we started classes at Norris Middle School. It's hard to believe that we could turn things around that quickly, but because of the work of guys like Dan and Dr. Stayskull and Jim Manning, we were able to do it. Norris students attended in the morning, and we attended in the afternoon, and Woody tells me that our class times were like from 12:30 until 5. I just remember I got in a few rounds of golf in the morning before. We had somewhere around 30 buses that were transporting students to and from Norris, and when we loaded and unloaded the buses, we pretty much had the school surrounded with buses. We ended the year at Norris, and then we started at Norris the following year in the same kind of a schedule. In October of 1975, we returned to Lewis and Clark, but only part of the building was completed, as you remember. This wing, the cafeteria, the music rooms, the gym, auditorium, and the home ec rooms and shops were not completed, so all the classes were taught in the east wing of the building. And we did split session again. The 9th graders came in the morning, and the 8th graders and 7th graders came in the afternoon. Wes can probably tell you some stories about bowling in the hallways upstairs. And it was some very creative teaching occurred during that year. I think a lot of microwave lessons were taught and things like that. But we made it. In April then of 1976, following spring recess, the entire renovation was completed and we moved into the entire building. And sometime shortly after that, we had a rededication of the building. And as all of you well remember, the school district did what I think was a great move at that time and took advantage of what happened to the building to renovate it. And so today, we sit in air-conditioned comfort as opposed to those at Central. And we thoroughly enjoy it. We're very, I might get taken down for that. I'm going to turn it over to Woody now and let him show you a slideshow. A number of you have provided him with photos and slides that he's used to put this together. It's a high-tech performance that he's going to do for you. And we hope it works. And then we'll come back for recollections.
Yeah, that was the intent when I started all of this, was to put together all of the pictures that I knew that there was probably a dozen people out there that took pictures, and I wanted to have that as part of the archives. There's some really great stories that are dealing with the tornado, and so after the slide presentation, I want you to share your terrific stories. Some are very humorous, some were very touching, and we went through a lot as a faculty, and we became very close. I think it was a significant thing that bonded many of us for a long time. So I want to go through the slide presentation a little bit. I'm not going to say too much. I'll just try to indicate where it's at. Okay. This is the path of the tornado. It hit down south of Ralston, and then it proceeded basically along 72nd Street. You can't see this too much. Basically, it comes down to, this is Creighton Prep, this is Lewis and Clark. And so we were hit. About a year later, we had somebody from Washington, D.C. come in, and he said that Lewis and Clark really wasn't hit by the tornado. It passed over about 100 yards overhead. So, that was a guy from Washington, D.C. This is the part of our entrance. You can see the Lewis and Clark School sign outside. Now, that's just the entrance. This is the aerial view. You can see the church and Lewis and Clark, and this is the parking lot, the church parking lot, and this is the academic wing. You can see the roof damage, and this area is the auditorium without the roof, and this is the gymnasium without the roof, and the shop area down in here, and this is the home ec rooms, and the custodian's room. This is where Mary Whitney used to... This is a little closer view, the academic wing, auditorium, gymnasium, roof, the shop. This is the home ec room here, home ec rooms, the west parking lot. This is what's left of Elaine Wisner's portable. This is the fence in the church parking lot over here. Another shot of the portables a day later. This is the entrance to this is the PE, the gymnasium in the west parking lot. This is looking from the portables to the gymnasium and the neighborhood. It looked like a lawnmower went across the tops of the trees. This is on the east side of the building, right after the tornado. The trees were brought down into this area. This is looking southeast. This is the church parking lot over here. The neighbors over here. Tree damage. This is looking from the church parking lot to the northeast. This is the east side of the building. This is the library. This is the principal's parking area. Portables used to be located over here. This is Dr. Stayskull's car that she had for one day. This is a close-up of Dr. Stejsko's car she had for one day. Another view. She had a lot of shots of her car. This is Jim Andion's car. Notice the board sitting in. Here's a better shot of it. There's the 2x4 stuck in the tire. It was facing the other way before the tornado hit. This is looking at the neighborhood. Joanne, is that your house? Yeah. I think that's part of her house anyway. There's the neighborhood. That's Joanne's house, right here. Is that your roof? Okay. This is the art room, and from church parking lot you can see the steps right here that lead up to the portable. This is the art room. I think that's the one that caught fire also previously that year. This is our fence line. I'm looking over Stejsko's car someplace over there. I can tell this is the principal's room. See the air conditioning units. Dan's office has the big air conditioning unit. This is the custodian's room, I think, isn't it, Mary? Okay, and this is the home entrance. This is the walkway down to the auditorium and the gym office up here. Same view, science rooms on the top. Looking toward the walkway to the cafeteria, and this is the music rooms over here and the steps down by the music rooms. You can see the church up to the... This is the home ec room, shop, boarded up. We're on top of the entrance, the roof looking, this is the auditorium without part of the roof, and the gymnasium back here. This is our entrance, the front entrance, looking to the west. There's two doors, there were two doors, and this, you can see it's laying down here. I think this is from the geography room, little globe. We're in the walkway right out here by the cafeteria, looking back toward 105, 106, I guess. First floor, we're in the cafeteria. Cafeteria's to the right. This is that walkway to the cafeteria located over here. This is the door into the walkway. This leads out to the portables. This is Dr. Stejsko's office. Deb, is this your room? I think it might be my room because there's a intramural trophy right there on the desk. Oh, it could have been Squires.
At least you had her.
This is Sally's science room before the tornado. There you are, Sally. This is the back of the stage, and Linda, help me out here. weren't the kids back here on this wall?
We were in the we were in the hall in between the stage and the.
But this is the stage, and this is the wall. The gym is over here.
Other side of the wall.
Yeah, so the kids were on the other side of this wall, over on this side. Now, later on, we found out that this wall had a 26-foot crack in it, and it moved over. The wall you guys were against had a half-inch, quarter-inch crack, and it moved over a little bit. And this is the one that this wall collapsed. So we're pretty lucky.
That was the door. It kept blowing open and closed the whole time.
Yeah, it was really a miracle.
The glass came down from that stairwell.
This is the library.
You see how the steel things were bent.
And remember, up on the second floor, all the lockers were pulled out of the wall on one side, and they were all pushed in on the other side. This is the ceiling of the gymnasium on the floor of the gymnasium. And over here is the girls' locker room. This is looking toward the exit of the gym, the other direction. This is our ceiling in the gymnasium. And remember, they used to have windows on the west side of the gymnasium. It was always an advantage when we were playing basketball, because we'd shoot at the other baskets and the other team had to look into the sun for the first half. This is Nancy's home ec room, cleaned up. Most of the ceiling was on top of all this. There's Nancy's ceiling. And that's also in the home ec room. This is the storage area. And you can see the debris. This is Norris. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. 10 minutes after the bell rang, they were all gone. I included a few pictures. This is Nancy Bisak.
Oh, Squire.
This is Kathy Squires. Mary Whitney. Sally. And our boss. That's it. What I'd like to do is start with the people that were here during the tornado and kind of go through what that experience was like and what was going on. And then we'll go into the recovery the next few days. Linda, do you want to start?
All I remember is cheerleading tryouts that night, and we had just finished. I walked out of the gym, and I think I turned probably to Ellen and said, "What's that siren?" And all of a sudden, I think it was Jim that came down and said that there was a tornado warning, and we all needed to take cover in that hallway that was between the gym and the stage area, right in that area. So we were all sitting down getting ready to go. I remember Marge came down and said we'd all die, and we stayed there and get to the other area and get in another direction. And I just remember that we had a lot of kids, and we had another group, and I don't remember who they were, but it was a group that was doing a play, a drama group that was on the stage. So we all got in there, and I guess probably the recollection I have the most is that Dr. Stasko had a portable radio with her. And I was kind of catty-cornered from her, and she was listening to the progress of the tornado as it made its way through the city. And I remember at one point, she looked at me and I looked at her, and we knew this thing was going to hit Lewis and Clark. It had, the direction it was coming, it had to hit. And I remember Ellen, for some reason, saying, "Everybody get down," and it went. And I just remember that afterwards,
basically after it was over, it seemed like it went on for eternity. And then when it was over, I just remember all of our kids being so happy and grateful that they were safe and so worried for their parents and their brothers and sisters. And that was probably what we spent most of our time taking care of, was their concern. And the only other thing I remember is it was cheerleading tryouts, and I had the ballots. And I didn't know what to do because I knew that we'd get over this and someone wanted to know if they made cheerleading. So I just sat, and all I remember doing was stuffing the ballots in my blouse. So that we wouldn't lose the ballots, because that was, I just didn't know where else to go. And then I remember everybody coming through it pretty well, and for some reason, and I don't know if I made this up, but I remember that the lady from the Salvation Army or the Red Cross or whatever was the only one that cut herself when she brought her tray of donuts in. It was an extraordinary experience, and I guess probably the only other thing is for years, I don't know if the rest of you did, but for years I had one tornado dream every spring, and it would wake me up, and then that kind of went away. But just the camaraderie and the work and the effort, and I always think about all those people at Norris and how great they were and how accepting of us being there. And of course we could talk about the other things. I remember the gym lockers and those deflating those balls and all that sort of stuff. So we could have some things to talk about.
You know, from that day, I remember, I think, one of my after-tornado biggest stories, because we've often laughed at this. We made up our equipment request and what things we lost to the tornado. We had a 12-pound shot put on there, and they never could figure out how we lost a 12-pound shot. We needed a new one, so we put it on the list and flew away.
John Olson and I decided around about 1 o'clock that we wasn't going to have track practice that day because we've been listening to the radio all day. And if we had track practice, there'd been about 150 kids out on the track at that particular time. And we called Dan and said, Dan, we're not going to have track practice. He said, okay, fine. You talked to Miss Kinney yet? I said, no. This is the first time I ever told Miss Kinney we're not having track practice. And she agreed with me that particular day. And I look back at that particular situation, and we've been coming up around about 4 to 5, and we've been right in the middle of the tornado.
The year tornado was my first year teaching, and I had to sign up for certain committees, and I signed up to help Little Wells with cheerleading. So I was here with helping Linda with the cheerleading. My sister was a judge, and my 2 nieces were here. And so when the tornado hit, I remember Ellen coming flying down the steps saying, it's in our parking lot, it's in our parking lot. And at that time, we all ducked over. And during the tornado, people will talk about the noise sounding like a train, and I don't remember the noise at all. I just remember crunched down, head covered, the door flapping like a screen door, and it just kept going on, and it kept going through my head. It's going to end, it's going to end, it's going to end, and it just didn't end, and it didn't end. But they said, what, 30 seconds? I mean, it was such a short amount of time that it felt. My other memory is after they let us move around a little bit, because there were wires hanging and cables hanging and everything, and seeing Joanne Freeman come out of her house with that drink in her hand. What was left of her house, they did. And then the other thing that I remember is my sister and I had parked our cars in the south lot over there, and came out, and mine was sitting on top of, mine was parked next to Jim Andy's facing north. When we came out, they were side by side facing south on the other side of the median. He had a board through his tire, and my car was sitting on top of the steeple, the copper from the steeple of the church. My sister's had been picked up and was sitting on top of the fence. And my sister kept saying, we need to go home, we need to go home. And we couldn't go home because the cars were on top of things and the windshields were broken. And the other thing I remember is my husband came because the next day was my birthday. My sister was having a birthday dinner for me. And he kept thinking that we were stuck at school with kids who couldn't get home. So he drove up here and he said, you know, you just drove up the top of that hill and you saw the school. He said it was just like the bomb had hit. And on the way home, we were taking us home. In my front yard, there were like 3 leaves off. It was like a whole different world from here to my house in South Omaha. And so those are the things that I remember.
I was on the portable when the tornado alarm went off, but I was washing my desk and putting them in the bulletin board, so I took out the Lord's windows. I didn't say anything, so I said, well, I'm going to finish this, and so my desks were clean. Ran the bulletin board on. So then it was getting late, so I wandered into the building. I remember this was before we had any intercom or anything. And I wandered down here and got down to the office. I was going to check my mail, and I thought, well, I'm kind of hungry, so I went into the teacher's lounge to see if there's any food left. Well, gosh, here was a little cache of cookies, like somebody just left, you know. So I had a cookie, and I said, I'm going to chomp on my cookie. And I looked out, and stuff was starting to blow, and suddenly something said, you better get out of here. So I thought, where shall I go? Where shall I go? So I started rushing. The only place I knew was my auditorium, was the auditorium in that little hallway behind there. And just about then, the custodian came out of the office. And he said, take cover, and we started running. And we ran down the steps into that flapping door that you all talked about. We tried to push in. The kids were holding it shut. We just got in just in time when that thing went roaring down. And when it was all over, I remember reaching in my pocket, and my pockets were just full of little fine glass. And all up and down my legs, I had little nick of blue blood. But that, nothing serious, but just that fine glass. Yeah. So then when we wandered out to look at the portable, here's all my clean desks gone, my bulletin board, all of those heavy file cabinets and everything. But sitting right in the middle of that portable was this little tiny wrought iron bookcase. And it had 30 of these little tiny books in it. I say one. And that was sitting right in the middle. That thing was just swirled around, and that one little thing was left. It was amazing. I found a great book in the mud right outside my door.
Well, where I was, across the street in my house, and I was so conscientious, just like Elaine. I had taken my book order home to type because it was due the next day, and when I heard those sirens, I said, well, I'll just take my book order and go down the stairs and type it all up. And pretty soon, I started hearing big noises, and I was on the phone talking to a friend, and she said, well, I think we better take cover under something. So I got under a desk that was in my son's bedroom downstairs, and it did sound like a train. I can hear that noise every May 6th. I hear that noise. Every time there's a siren, I hear that train. Well, I was sure I was downstairs for at least a half an hour, but I know I wasn't. And when it all blew over, I walked upstairs and I saw the sky. And I thought, aren't I lucky to be able to get up these stairs, that it didn't all come tumbling down on top of me. And I looked around, I looked over at the school, and I saw half the school in my yard, and I didn't see any people over there, and I thought, I better find a bottle of scotch. So fortunately, the liquor cabinet was not destroyed. I bravely carried my bottle of scotch, no glasses, nothing like that, out, and I waited, shaking, hoping somebody would come up from across the street. And when I saw Elaine and Marge and Linda, and I was very relieved. And I didn't even think about what I had to face, not only here, but at my house. And if you haven't seen that book that was in the library here, you really, is there anybody who has a shelf in the library. Something right on a shelf. And this shard of glass just came right through it, and it was still on the shelf like that. I mean, I think this really shows the impact of that tornado.
Yeah, I had permission to leave school early that day. We didn't have a track meet. And so Mark said, sure, you can get out. And I knew I was going to have trouble getting by Ed Hayes because he stopped me and I had to talk. So I got by his office down there and got out to my car and I was able to take off. And I got out on 72nd Street and there was no traffic to the south. So no traffic to the south. And so I thought, that's funny. And I had never listened to the radio that day, so I wasn't aware of the tornado coming. And I went by Creighton Prep and the siren went off. And I thought, boy, that's something. So I flipped on the radio. That's when I got the warning, and I thought, well, it's too late to turn around and go back to Lewis and Clark. I'll go home and see how the family's doing there. And so I got home just as the tornado had lifted up over Benson. And we lived over by Nathan Hale. And so when I pulled into the driveway, all the air was full of paper and so forth. And one of the banks had blown away down south. And so after the tornado, my son and my wife went out and picked up checks, and I came back to Lewis and Clark. And I had to park over west, and when I came back, I saw Joanne again. Talked to her just for a moment. And then I went around the building to see how things were, and, anything survived. And one thing I noticed that was kind of peculiar, the secretary, her desk was moved around, but she had a vase with a single rose, and nothing was done to that rose in the office. And everything else was in shadow. And so that amazed me. And then, of course, the next day is when we got busy to build a schedule. And it was my job to build a schedule to get us down to George Norris. And I had to get a plaque of the school, and somebody from the Board of Education came out with the plaque and with the school room markings. And so I started building the schedule, and then Ed Klima came out, Joe Hanna came out. Who was the principal before? Jay Plantine came out, and they were going to help me build a schedule. However, none of them had ever built a schedule with a computer before, and had no idea what they were doing. So Marge finally got them away from me, and I was over at another table, and Marge did her job that week and kept people away from me. And so we built a schedule to move out of this school and into George Norris, and we lost only 3 days of school, which I look back on and I think that's a miracle that we could do it. And then we lined up all the buses to get there, and that was it.
Dan, where were you when you were doing the schedule? Where did you do
Here
that?
in the cafeteria. And I got under part where the roof was because it was raining the next couple of days, and so I had to keep my schedule dry. I couldn't figure out. I asked my wife, I said, how come I didn't take any pictures? And she said, you're building a schedule. Yes, that was it.
That day, I wonder if any of you who were here remember who the specialist was from. I don't think it was Washington, D.C., but from New York or somewhere. There was a young man, some kind of specialist, who was to give us some wonderful information. And Marge said all of we teachers should go. It was not mandatory, but she preferred that we go. We were up in the library, enjoying supper. And I was so edgy because I've been in 3 tornadoes. One took our home before, and I know people have been died. There's a certain feel to the air. And I could feel that air. I went up to the library, and that young man, I had a plastic raincoat in my closet. I took took it along, and I kept taking it in and out, and it was raining cats and dogs outside. Kept turning around to the windows. Then, pretty soon that young man said, well, man, if you're that afraid of storms, you may leave. I took out like a herd of turtles, went downstairs, out to my car, and turned on the radio, and the first thing I heard was that there was a tornado in Springfield heading this way. I ran back into that's when I could still run. Ran back into the office and told the clerks who were there was no intercom or anything. I said, get that radio off that damn rock and roll and turn it to KMAB. And that's exactly what I said. They did, and that alerted them. And it was raining so hard until I got to 52nd and Leavenworth. Then it stopped, it was still. And then I got on home, and I was in the basement 10 minutes before the tornado and the sirens started.
I was at that meeting too, as many of the others of you were, and
what happened to that man?
And I remember looking out, and it was just as black as night outside, and the lightning was coming straight down. It didn't just fork and go, in different directions. It was going straight down. And I remember how uncomfortable Georgine was, and he told her to go, and she did, and he should have. But when it was over, it was about 4:30, and so I did a few things, and then I went down to the office, and it was some kind of a radio or something, but it said that Lewis and Clark should take cover because the tornado was heading that way. And I looked at Marge and I said, does that mean we have to take cover? I really want to go home. And she kind of shrugged her shoulders, and so I walked down to the south door, and I thought, oh, now if I look out and I see a tornado, I will take cover. But otherwise, I think I'll just go on home, because I was so accustomed to tornado warnings, I just didn't take it seriously. And so I looked out, and I didn't see a tornado because I was looking for the traditional tail that a tornado has, and there wasn't any. The whole sky to the southwest was black. And actually, the tornado was on the ground, and it was not that far away. But I thought, well, since I don't see a tail, I'm not going to take cover. I'm going to go home. Well, I was fortunate because I was going northwest, away from it. But if I'd been going to Ursula's house or going southwest, I'd have been right in the middle of it. But I thought, well, if I see a tornado, I'll just take cover wherever I'm at. But that was one of the foolish things that I did, but really, in a way, it was a good thing because I wasn't involved in the actual tornado. But that was at 4:30, and our clock stopped at 4:45. So it must have been down on Pacific about it.
I had been down to Linda's tryouts for cheerleading because some of my girls wanted me to come and cheer them along. I'd ridden to school with Carol, and she can explain why we had to go home. But she came down and got me and said, we need to go home now. I said, all right. So we had just gotten home, and the sirens went off, and I lived at Wentworth, USA at that point, which was the very first place that was struck. And yes, it did sound like a train, and as the tornado lifted, we could see the bank roof of the Ralston Bank just being strewn, and my only thoughts were, that intersection and all the people that would be there. We had to get out of the complex right away. There was gas leaks and everything, and so my husband and I just started driving south. They wouldn't let us, we kept driving south. We kept driving south because they wouldn't let us come up north area. And so finally by 10 o'clock that night, we had found a place to go, and I called Dr. Stayskull. And I said, Dr. Stayskull, I am just really sorry, but I don't think I'm going to make it. Judy, don't you know? And I said, no, what? She said, well, and I think that was probably the only time I heard Dr. Stayskull cry. And but we all know what a strong and wonderful leader she was, and how she got us through that.
I remember the next morning specifically that I got up and I was out here probably about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I had to walk in from the east to get into the area, but it reminded me of when I was in the military and I was stationed in Europe, and I had seen a lot of bombed out areas in Berlin and other areas of the country, and that's exactly what this place looked like, and especially we had to get past the National Guard to get in here, so it really reminded me a lot of my tour there and the devastation, especially the cars parked on the side of the building here. That was my first impression. But from there, what really impressed me is how we as a group came together, and that it was that very next day we were in here in our blue jeans and tennis shoes and work gloves, and we started that recovery process even before we had any idea what we were going to do. I think most of us went to our rooms or one of the rooms we were stationed in and just started picking up stuff, started cleaning up stuff, and you know, we got through Where Were You and all of that sort of thing, and then as a united group, I think we just thought and worked together as to where we were going to go. And again, Dan putting that schedule together, and 3 days later, on Monday, starting back in school down at Norris was just an unbelievable feat that I just didn't. I pretty much have watched the rest of the year off. You know, when I got down to Norris, I kind of looked at this as a kind of a fourth month of the summer, because I didn't think we were going to be that serious about getting into the teaching mode again. It was kind of just keep the kids happy and out of trouble, but we really as a group got into it, and to this day, as I was mentioning earlier to some people, this is almost like a class reunion. For me it is anyway, because of what we did as a group and how it has affected our lives. It was a great opportunity to come together, and I think we really did.
I remember Dr. Statesville saying you need to get all the books out of the lockers and clean up everything and get them boxed up, and then we'll move the books down to the trucks to go to Norris or to the storage area. So we were boxing up books and going through the lockers upstairs, and we had and you're supposed to put the boxes out in the hall, and we got them out in the hall, and we said, what next? And she said, well, we need to move them down to the truck. I said, aren't they bringing people in to help us? And she said, yeah, there's 2 guys standing down by the truck. I said, who's going to take all these hundreds of boxes down from the 2nd floor down to the truck? And she looked at me and smiled. So we moved all the boxes from upstairs down to the truck, and I asked the guys standing by the truck if they'd move that ramp, if they could at least bring it up to waist high so I didn't have to bend down with the boxes 100 times to put them down here so they could lift them up to here. And they said, no, that would cause an undue stress on the truck.
That reminds me, what are you talking about that? You guys helped us in the science department help box up some of our stuff, and there were some of these guys from the truck up there helping. They were getting some of the stuff down. And he said, what's in these jars, these bottles? And I said, that's hydrogen peroxide, and that's sulfuric acid, and that's ammonium hydroxide. And the guy said, I don't care what they're called, can they hurt me? I said, yeah, they can hurt me. From that time on, he was kind of like holding nitroglycerin. That was kind of the humorous side of it. Another thing I remember is going up into my room and some of the things that were so strange, how everything was disarrayed. Like you guys have been saying, certain things were just left unscathed. I had all my specimens in jars on a cart, and they were sitting right there, and my goldfish were still alive. The aquarium was still intact. But then I looked at something that was really eerie to me. There's a picture of it right over there. You see, I had a human anatomy model in my room, and it was thrown everywhere. And I went to pick it up, started to put it together, and I did say, this piece right here. Doesn't look too good, does it? Got a broken neck and a cracked cranium and busted nipples. But, after I collected it all, I never did find it all. And I got to thinking, there's some poor guy cleaning up in his backyard. And he's looking down and going, oh my God, a heart. I just couldn't help that one. That was kind of bizarre. I'd like to echo a couple of feelings here before I pass the microphone on, but coming back and seeing such wonderful friends and such great friends and faces, I echo Arden's comments that I don't know if every group of people could have tackled that job as this faculty did. You and I know that we had something very special here at this school, and you still do. But there was a faculty camaraderie and a love. That was the key thing that we had here. We loved each other. We loved doing what we were doing. And that's why nobody said anything except, what else can we do? That's why Kathy Hammerhands and Arden Eccles were in the science department helping us out. And that's why you guys were sitting on basketballs and making the air go out of them. It was really, really a phenomenal thing. I guess that's all I have to say. Thanks.
PE department?
Oh, shoot. I forgot to say one thing. If I hear a bowling ball go down the science, you know how to teach things I'm going. This is all sitting here. Boom. I like to just switch to bowls after that.
It wasn't my decision to do the bowling ball. It was Dan Jones' decision to do the bowling ball. We was talking about, Ellen and I was talking about some things that we did in the PE department. But when we first came back to Lewis and Clark, I kept on getting phone calls from George Norris for some odd reason that we had still boxes of jockey straps still in George Norris. They kept on telling us to come and get them. I said, I don't want them. I don't want them. They said, are they new or used? I said, they used it, so you got to burn them. So it was really something about when we finally got back into Lewis and Clark to get rid of the jockey straps, the shorts, the tennis shoes. I mean, I had just tons of deodorant for the next 5 years. I just took everything home that I could use, tennis shoes, everything. I still got some Lewis and Clark shorts from them. I might not fit them, but I still have them. Yeah. But we was talking about the bowling ball. We did bowling ball. I think Dr. Stasel gave me what's that thing that used to come in and do all this? Evaluation. And she took evaluation from me, teaching how to teach bowling ball and how to keep score and how to teach bowling down the hallway. And she kept on wondering, why did the bowling ball keep on hitting the register? I said, Dr. Stasel, they're doing that because they want to make sure everybody know they're bowling down the hallway. She said, well, why don't we stop them? I said, oh, it sounds good. That's where a couple of teachers come out, can you stop this, please? But we, in the library, Miss Freeman let us use her library for a while. We gambled a little bit up there. We had some dice, There's no money ever came out, but Dan told us a couple times, put the dice away. Card games, we taught them how to play bid whiz and spades and tone. We even brought in Pokino and a couple other things that we had really improvised while we was here. And then they finally moved us down to this room. And Ellen and I was talking about if we was doing some of the things that we did in 1975, now we'd be sued. We're looking at all this glass in here. We was throwing horseshoes, check tennis, badminton, all those types of things. I said it was amazing how well we came together as a group. The PE department and everybody else. It made me feel like, it was a family. It really was a family at that particular time. And I still consider people as family right now because I haven't seen people in a long time. And you still look the same, and you still act the same. We still care about one another. I really appreciate that.
The only faculty where you had 1,000 white kids being able to play tonk.
I remember a couple things that haven't been mentioned. One of them was the tar on the roof was embedded in everything. We got to George Norris and the kids would say, oh, these books are full of tar and broken pieces of glass. And the other thing was that I thought it was the recovery time for me was kind of fun because who else went with me down to the original Nebraska Furniture Mart? Was that you, Joanne? Was that you, Judy? We had some money from the PTO that we were allowed to spend on furniture, but when we went down there and told them what had happened, Rose Lumpkin said, take what you want, and for the faculty lounge. So we had all new furniture for the faculty lounge, and it was really fun to just go on a shopping spree. It was fun.
Ruth, you want to? Trudy.
Okay. I was in that same meeting that you talked about, left about 4:30, but after the whole tornado, then Jim Anding knew that I very often worked till 5:30, so he and the lady from the Red Cross were going through the building looking for people, and they came down to my room. The whole hallway was just full of rubble because so much of it came in that loading dock door besides the roof falling out. But Jim and she came into the room and they saw some pink fabric under a whole bunch of rubble, and they thought it was me. And she couldn't look. She went out into the hall, and he came over and lifted everything off, and it was just a tablecloth. But ordinarily I would have been like this. That I had just decided after that meeting, heck, I'm just going to go on home. I'm not going to go back down. The other thing that was kind of interesting is when I went back into my room after they had cleared up some of this stuff, and I thought, wow, at least all the doors to the cabinets are closed. The drawers are all closed. It looked like things inside the cupboards were going to be okay. And we opened them, and it was full of that tar and fiberglass and everything. And we have all that wall of tote tray cabinets filled with the kids' sewing supplies. And finally, my supervisor suggested that we just take big garbage bags, and we would go, like, for period 1, dump everything in that garbage bag. For period 2, dump everything in that one. We took them all over to Norris, and then we started sorting it out, holding things up, and what wasn't labeled, seeing if someone could identify it. That was terrific.
Oh, thank goodness my room was as much of a mess as Nancy's. She mentioned the tote trays, but I had left a short time you guys did. I thought, oh gosh, just leave too bad out for my husband's birthday, just the day after, the next day. And so I was down shopping, and I was buying a wedding gift too. And I thought, I looked outside, and busy, just don't bother me. I have to get this wedding gift, and I was buying the jewelry. Hey, I can't be bothered with this dumb tornado warnings and all. And so you probably remember where you register and go down and buy your driver's license. That door, you go down. Well, I was going by there, and some guy ran, and he says, it's going to hit. Well, I was a believer. I went in, we shut the door, and it hit. And of course, so we got to stay down in the basement the whole time. Oh, what a boring time. And I went out, and the car next to me had broken windows. That side had broken windows. I had nothing. I drove home. So I felt very lucky, but it still was a scary mess. And it was a lot of, I guess when you look back on it a year or two later, it was fun.
We had an incredible experience cleaning up the library. As you can imagine, there were over 12,000 books. And the parent group organized volunteer parents to come in, and we had to hold up every book and leaf through each one to get the asphalt out, to get the tar out, and if they were really badly damaged, we could not discard them until they were evaluated. So we had to wipe them off and then pack them in metal cases where they were taken to be stored until we moved back into the building. But I was absolutely overwhelmed with the number of parents who came and were there for hours at a time cleaning those books. And even kids would come in. And this was all done in those few days before we went to Norris to clean out that library. really quite amazing.
Well, just to finish up, Jim, Andy, and I always blamed Marge Spaceko for that year. It started out with the fire in the art department, destructive, and then we had a blizzard, and it was during this blizzard that they couldn't get home from the castle, and Dr. Johanna had to stay at a motel, and he decided to sign in as Dr. Johanna, and he was called out 3 times that night for medical problems. And then we had the tornado, so the next day Jim and I went to Marge privately and said, "What else do you have planned?" And then I have a problem when we rebuilt. I had to come back many, many times. I had my helmet over here. But I would come back and they started painting and we ended up with all this orange. Marge liked orange. But we were blue and white. And we don't have blue and white because Marge didn't like it. And I argued with Mert Hall and everybody. Get it back to blue and white, like the original colors. And they wouldn't listen, And then I also wrote a letter to the Board of Education. And I said, when you're rebuilding, I want you to put a door on the outside of my office.
Oh, no.
And I want you to make me a little putting green. I sent the letter to him, but I never did get a reply.
We've heard about tornado from the faculty and the staff's point of view. Seeing it from a student's perspective, and I am considered the only student that came back to this reunion, because this school meant a lot to me too. When I got home, the siren had just gone off, so I just told my family, take cover immediately. So I had no idea I had no idea what was going to happen. Tornado warning didn't end until 7 o'clock. I turned on the news that night, and TV had all the damage, and they showed Lewis and Clark. And my mom put her hand on my shoulder. She said, "Jackie, you okay?" I says, "No. My school's been destroyed. Where am I going to go to school?" I was more concerned about going to school than having an extended summer vacation. That is a confession, I admit. And as the couple of days that we were out of school, Mom said, "You going to school?" I said, "No, they don't know what they're going to do. We still don't know." They made the announcement that Lewis and Clark students will be going to Norris on Monday. I'm like, Monday? We only got hit last Tuesday. I'm thinking, man, for most students, they look at teachers, counselors, the principal, they think, oh, they're not human. They're robots that tell us, you need to do this, you need to do that. But I found out that you really are caring, considerate human beings. And that's what sticks out with me from May 6, 75 to May 6, 2000.
I know all of you have felt, as I've felt all these years, how God was with us and the children were here. And I sort of remember, my old age, I'm not remembering too well, but I remember that we used to have drills and we lined them up on the floor of the halls in front of those lockers. And I think I even remember that we took some of them to the auditorium. Can you imagine what would have happened, having nowhere to take those children? I guess that's what I think about the very most of all.
Dan said that you all blamed Marge. That was my first year. The fire, I went out on the fire alarm, and Marge came up behind me and said, "Your room is on fire." And I was across the hall. Thank goodness it wasn't mine. And then the blizzard, and then the tornado, and Marge said to me, "If there's a flood, we're both out of here."
I just want to take time, first of all, to thank everybody for coming this afternoon. But there are some people that we need to recognize, I need to recognize for the work they've done in putting this together. And I hope everybody's had as much fun as I have today. Just, first of all, seeing everybody again and being together and then listening to some of the stories. This is really the brainchild of Woody. 3-4 months ago says, this is the 25th year, we need to do something. And it needs to become a historical record, and that's why we're videotaping this afternoon.
This is the only song I've ever written that went platinum, by the way. Just kidding, Jim. For those of you that might need a little introduction, we had a good time putting together faculty parties. Matter of fact, I've yet to play some of the audio cassettes that I still have at home, which probably could go for quite a bit. Not believe what we cut. But we had fun doing those things. And one particular night, I don't know how it happened, but a song was born that stayed with us for many, many years about a very important person to all of us, Bad Daniel Jones. Just to set the tone about Bad Daniel Jones, for those of you who need a little bit of a kind of remembrance, a couple of important parts of dance in my history. I remember being on door duty on the south entrance of Lewis and Clark one morning and watching all this paper blowing across the yard on the campus, and I picked it up, and it was a ripped up pornographic magazine. And I thought, whoa, this is not good. Parents were letting their kids off. And there was one of my own students there looking and going like, whoa. And I said, John, you've got to help me. We've got to get this stuff up now. So we all got it up, and I grabbed it. And I put it together, and I raced it down to Dan's office. And I said, Dan, I just thought you'd want to see what was blowing all over our schoolyard this morning. And Dan goes, disgusting. Thanks a lot, Ron. Shut the door on your way out. And the last one I remember was the young man walking down about the mid-direction of the intersection of the main hall and the academic wing, who had an expletive that was not appropriate for the school. And I said, excuse me, young man, that is not the type of language we use at Lewis and Clark Junior High School. I think you need to come to the office with me. I sat him down in the back office, and I walked into Dan Jones. I said, Dan, I've got a young man out here who just doesn't know the proper language to be used in the school environment. I think you need to talk to him. He said, thank you, Mr. Caesar. Bring that little SOB in.
Well, it's 69th and First Street, the place where we all roam. All the kids that go there just better beware a man named Daniel Jones. Well, Daniel, he's the VP. He's the godfather of us all. When the kids just shudder when they see that man just walking down the hall. He's bad Daniel Jones, baddest man that you've ever known, badder than you can mention. He's badder than a kid in detention. Well, one day a teacher told Dan that a girl was smoking pot. But when he found out she was in the restroom, he didn't know if he should go in or not. But Daniel knew his duties, and he liked his job a lot. But instead of finding marijuana, there was Mary Jane on the pot. And he's bad Daniel Jones, the baddest man that you ever know, badder than you can mention. Badder than a kid in detention. Sing it with me. He's bad Daniel Jones, the baddest man that you'll ever know. He's badder than you can mention. He's better than kid detention. Next slide. Thank you, that's all.
It was amazing how well we came together as a group.
I don't know if every group of people could have tackled that job as this faculty did. But there was a faculty camaraderie and a love. That was the key thing that we had here. We loved each other. We loved doing what we were doing.
It was a great opportunity to come together, and I think we really did.
You know, we went through a lot as a faculty, and we became very close. I think it was a significant thing that bonded many of us for a long time.
And I think that was probably the only time I heard Dr. Staysko cry. And but we all know what a strong and wonderful leader she was, and how she got us through that.